He promised us the second talk last year. He gave a presentation in April, in fact, 2021. And I'm really looking forward to the second part of his talk, which is about birds of the Neotropics. I'm pretty excited about that. A lot of you know Vivek from his membership here. And as all of you probably know, we really wanted to thank SVCS, the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society, for hosting. This is the last show event for the year in May, and we will come back in September after the summer break. And usually in September we have the bring your own bird photos to show. So we'll announce that and go on. But before September, you'll actually see a couple of emails from me and Steve asking for some help. So we are looking forward to getting more ideas from all of you. Zoom calls are working very well. We are able to invite outside speakers outside of the Bay Area, which is pretty exciting. But how do we keep this momentum going? And how do we also encourage local photographers? And more importantly, one thing that Steve and I really want to push is how do we get young birders into the group? And how do we encourage them into showing their photographs, telling a story, and teaching them good bird ethics and so on. So please look out for those emails in the near future. So with that, Vivek, it's all yours. I am actually going to make you a co-host, and hopefully that should be pretty straightforward and it works like a charm.
All right. So before I get going, I think like last time, photo credits, a lot of these photos are my son's Vayun's. He's right here. So he's actually off to college at the end of the summer. So, but yeah, I used a lot of his pictures there because often they're better than mine. So I'll start now. Please let me know if this works.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. All right. So say hi, everyone. So I'm continuing from last time. So if you remember, those of you who were there or who saw the recording, I was going to talk about the bird of the Neotropics with a personal perspective. This is not a scientific talk by any means. So it was really going to be a personal perspective. And but then I realized as I was putting it together, there were way too many species, way too many birds. South America is the bird continent. You add in Central America and the Neotropics, that's by far the richest bird zone in the world. Probably close to 4,000 species, if you include Mexico and all of the Neotropics. So there's no way to be able to do any kind of a justice, even if I just covered one bird per family. So we decided that we'll split it up. That time I covered the non-passerines and the non-perching birds, which is the top half. The families are up here. And today I'm going to cover the perching birds, or the passerines, which are in the second half. The key difference between the passerines and the non-passerines is the passerines have evolved to really be like true perching birds. They have a hind claw, which is elongated, and it helps them grasp twigs and branches that they perch on. And the tendon structure is such that it helps them grab on. Now, the reality is that the passerines are actually in terms of genetic diversity, it isn't as much as it is among the non-passerines. So the non-passerines, you go all the way from hawks and guans to barbettes and parrots. There's like a lot more diversity. So related to that, the passerines are very similar to each other. And some even argue if all the passerines together should be just one family, because they're very similar in their morphology and the genetics. But despite that, there is actually a lot of diversity. And in fact, there are more passerines than non-passerines. And especially in the Neotropics, if we say it's roughly 3,500 birds, let's say in South America, of which 2,000 are the passerines and the 1,500 the non-passerines. So there are a lot of birds to show. I think last time I went for an hour and 15 minutes. It felt a little long. So this time I'm going to try to time myself and keep it to an hour. If people still have energy at the end of that and we still have some interest, I can probably show a few more pictures that I decided to take out at the last minute. But other than that, I'm just going to dive in. If there are any urgent questions or clarifications, please put them in the chat, and then Sridhar will call out, because I actually cannot see the chat window right now. So in my last talk, I did a quick overview of what we mean by the Neotropics. So I'm not going to repeat all of that. I'll be very quick. and then we'll go straight to the birds. But the Neotropics is defined as everything essentially from Mexico onwards, and including all of South America and the Caribbean. That's just how the bird world, the humans have divided the bird world, and the Neotropics is anything basically south of the border. So it's a large area. And then these spots are the various places that I've traveled to in roughly since 1995. So it's close to 30 years now. A good chunk of those trips were with just a pair of binoculars, no camera. So I don't have pictures from those, but I do have from more recent times. So I won't, I'll speak a little bit about where each picture is taken, but I may not always say that. And then, so this is a quick overview of all the bird families which are in the Passerines. And what I've tried to do here, this is a book cover, the inside cover of All the Birds of the World, which is a new book from Lynx Publications. So I annotated them with these green dots to show what's an endemic family to the Neotropics and what's a non-endemic family. And the interesting thing here is that certain families are essentially entirely endemic. They are the characteristic South American families. So you have the ant birds, and they're associated birds like the ant pittas, ant thrushes, and then you get into the mannequins and the cotengas. These are like the classic Neotropical birds. And then you get further down towards the Ovenbirds. Let's see, where are the Ovenbirds in this list? And then you have maybe I missed them. No, the Ovenbirds are here, right here. The Ovenbirds or the Furnarids are there. And then you come down to this side towards the end on the tanager-like birds. So finches and tanagers. And so there we have a few families which are endemic to the Neotropics. Then there are a lot of other bird families which have a few representatives in the old world, like the wrens. There's one bird, the winter wren, or after it's been split, which is in the old world. Other than that, all the wrens are actually in the new world, not the Neotropics, but the new world. So that's the other thing that happens is a lot of the Neotropic birds, they will come into North America. And then since we include Mexico, then essentially most of the North American birds are also into Mexico. So in that sense, all the North American birds are Neotropical birds too. So there are families like that, but what I'll want to focus on today are primarily the ones which are more characteristic of the Neotropics. When you see them, you'll know, yeah, I think of this as a South American bird, a Central American bird, and I'll sprinkle in a few others. And then this is just a quick sense of the number. So you can see here, so this bottom half are the Passerines. Antbirds, over 200 species of antbirds. Then the Ovenbirds, the Furnarids, and now the Woodcreepers are combined with them. That's over 300 species in one family. And then the most amazing family of all is the Tyrant Fly Catchers, or the true South America, the Neotropical Flycatchers, 422. This is bigger than the total bird count in a lot of countries around the world. And then even the Tanagers and Allies, and there's been a lot of taxonomy changes that go on here. But even what's now called the Thropidae, that's 377 species. So big family. So these are the classic birds. Obviously, these are the ones we'll spend some more time on. But then you have things like the Gotengas, which are basically endemic. There is nothing in the old world like them, even though some people compare them to the birds of paradise. The other thing to just point out here would be that there are a lot, this whole taxonomy keeps changing. And especially in the tanagers, cardinals, finches, in that group, which is sometimes called the 9 primary assemblage, because it looks like they have 9 primaries. They actually have 10 primaries. The 10th one is very small and sort of hidden. There's a lot of changes that go on there. Similarly, a lot of changes in the mannequin, Gotenga, flycatcher in that section up here. So I'm just sticking with the one that seems to be converging, and which is the eBird, Clements, Birds of the World, Handbook of the Birds of the World. They have sort of all converged into one. And so I'm going to just use that taxonomy as we go forward. And we know it's going to change again. And in particular, what's going to happen most likely is that some of these big families like the flycatchers and the tanagers are further going to see more splits and divisions and merges. All right, so we already talked about my son Vayun, so a lot of pictures of his to give him credit. This was actually in Peru. This was in Ecuador, and now he's grown up enough. This was when we did the Christmas bird count this year. So full credit to a lot of his pictures. And then I want to talk about, I just want to mention that, this talk has pictures from many, many years, and you will see variable quality. Some of them were, I was shooting with a 20D, and I was shooting in JPEG, and I just barely started, and I didn't really know post-processing rather well. So I have pictures like that, and then I have my more recent pictures. So there's a lot of difference in quality. But it was fun to do this because I went back to this trip that Ashok and I made, and we had a guide in Ciro Albano. This was in Northeast Brazil, and it was still sort of early on. This was in 2011, and it wasn't on the birding circuit in a very big way by then. So we were among the first few photographers who were there, and we had a good mix of a birding interest where we were looking for endemics, and then also wanted to get pictures. So I had to go back to that, and I realized now it's already been 10 years since Ashok and I gave a talk here. But I went back and I found a lot of pictures which I hadn't included in the first talk around. So this time I'm going to be including those because they give us a very good selection of non-passerines. And so a lot of diversity of habitat there. This is Diamantina National Park, which is this tepui-like landscape. It has a lot of dry woodland. And then we have, this is the endemic landscapes of Northeast Brazil. There's a Caatinga, which is like a thorny forest. Then you get to the Atlantic rainforest, which is where this was taken. So all of that adds a lot of diversity. So, all right, let's now jump straight to the birds. Now, typically what happens even with passerines is that most treatments will divide them into two groups, the Oscine passerines and the sub-Oscine passerines. So the Oscine in Latin means singing birds. So these are the true songbirds, and the jays and the wrens and the tanagers, vireos. And the sub-Oscines are the ones which are supposed to not have very complex vocalizations. Ovenbirds, woodcreepers, Antbirds, Flycatchers. Most of the sub-Oscines are actually in the New World. There are just a few in the Old World. And the main difference here is in their vocal cords, the structure of the throat and the vocal cords. So the sub-Oscines can only make single notes. So they can, or single frequency notes. So they can string them together. So they have a lot of calls, but a lot of them seem like, repetitive calls and trills and things like that. While the Oscine passerines can go into the higher overtones, and you get really complex calls, like from the wrens, for example. So traditionally, that's been the way a key difference is done. So we'll do it the same way. We'll start with the sub-Oscine passerines, and the very first set of these is the typical antbirds. Now, why are they called antbirds? So it's not because these birds eat ants. It just happens that some of them follow army ants, and some of them do eat ants, but not army ants. But there is nothing special about antbirds and eating ants. So a few of them follow army ants, but the rest don't. So it's just more of a name. And you'll see things like this. This is an ant shrike, and then I'll show an ant wren and an ant bird, ant vireos. So I think it's just when they came to the New World and they were looking for English names, they just went by the structure of the bird, and it wasn't so much about the fact that it had anything to do with ants. So the names represent more of the structure and their interrelationships with each other than actual morphology. But this is a fasciated ant shrike. This is one of my favorite photographs. This was in Panama. Antbirds are very hard to photograph. In most cases, they're very hard to photograph, especially if you don't use playback. And this is one of those times when I didn't use playback. I just happened to see this on the side of a trail, and then I noticed that it had the scorpion in there. So these guys eat arthropods, insects, things like that. A lot of ant shrikes, a lot of species. This is a great ant shrike. This is like a really pretty one. This is also all over the Neotropics. This one has a very simple call to remember. It's like a bouncing ball. Most of these antbirds, woodcreepers, ovenbirds, to me, they all sound alike. They all have these sequence of notes and trills, and I cannot tell them apart. I don't have a musical ear, and I don't have a musical memory. But this one I remember because it has a bouncing call. So it's a great ant shrike. This is an endemic bird in Brazil, Northeast Brazil, the silver-cheeked ant shrike. I just love this one, the look of this. It's a very striking one. And then this is another classic ant shrike, the barred ant shrike. This is all over the Neotropics too. Now, I used to wonder, what's the advantage of this black and white pattern? I mean, it doesn't look like it would give you that much of a particular advantage as a camouflage. But then in this picture, it does seem like, this pattern of black and white, it merges with this dappled sunlight and shade that is a very typical thing inside the forest, especially with this plant going in the background. So now I believe that this pattern actually might help these birds blend in. And you will see in a lot of these pictures, the hardest thing in rainforest photography or in any forest photography is these patches of light, because you get patches of light coming through branches, and that makes it really, really hard. So anyway, barred antshrike, and then there's sexual dimorphism in the antbird. So this is the male barred antshrike, this is the female. This is one of those few examples where they're very distinctly very different. This is a chestnut-backed antshrike. This bird had a lot of personality, and so decided to include that photograph. You will see a lot of these pictures. There won't be any kind of a showcase photograph, but the bird is the star. So I don't apologize for including pictures like this, and you'll see a lot of bad pictures. But I've done that because I really think those birds are special. So this is a chestnut-backed antshrike. This is a black hooded antshrike from Costa Rica. This is endemic to Costa Rica and Panama. It's a relatively rare and localized bird. I was very happy to get this. This one was my earliest photographs, and this was with a 20D and with a 400 lens and with very poor post-processing. All right, so those were antshrikes. Now ant wrens. And there's nothing about wrens with these birds. I think it's just some of them look like wrens, and so they were called ant wrens. This one doesn't look anything like a wren, but it is in that same family. This is a star-throated ant wren. So very creative names, in fact, or we should say very uncreative names. They just, in some ways, they're very fanciful. In other ones, they just describe what they think is the most obvious feature. So here, this one is a star-throated ant wren, very short tail. But this is the more typical ant wren. And this genus and several of these have these long tails. They're small birds with these long tails. This is a black-capped ant wren from endemic to Atlantic forest in Brazil. The interesting thing with this particular genus of ant wrens is that they are spread all over South America. And in fact, the funny thing here is that people are still finding new species in this genus. And they actually look at a certain area of the map, and they say, well, we don't seem to have any kind of a ant wren of this genus in that area. So perhaps there is one. We just need to go there and find it. So they came up with this name of a predicted ant wren. They looked at the map. It was somewhere in Brazil between the intersection of two large rivers. And they said, well, nobody has talked about this genus of an ant wren there. There must be one, and let's call it the predicted ant wren. And sure enough, they did an expedition there and they found it. And that bird is still called the predicted ant wren. So it's not this one, but there are these localized birds all over the map. And this is one of them. This is an ash-throated ant wren. This was from Peru, and this is a highly endangered bird. It's a very small area on the east slope in northern Peru. And when I took this picture, this was, if not the first picture, it was at least the first decent picture of the species. And this was high up in the canopy, and this just a little pinprick of a shot, and I had to crop it and worked a lot on post-processing it to have any sort of a picture. But it was a significant photograph at that time. Now, in fact, a lot of people have seen it. This is actually close to Wakanki Lodge, which a lot of birders go to. But this particular thing requires hiking up a very steep, muddy ridge, and was lucky enough with the group. I went with the group on this one. Very happy to have seen this ash-throated ant wren. But this is what's special about this group of birds. Then you get to these ant wrens, which are more prettier, and they have a longer tail. And this one is a rusty-backed ant wren from Peru. It's also spread, it goes all the way to Brazil. This, on the other hand, is a highly localized bird. This is a Sencora ant wren, highly endangered. This might even be one of those birds with the smallest range. I sometimes wonder which is the bird that I've seen with the smallest range. And it could be a toss-up between the Araripe Mannequin and a Sencora ant wren and a couple of others. So this was with Ashok and I. This was very recently discovered, was like in the 1990s in one section of Diamantina National Park. And it was very distinct from anything else. It had similarities to the rusty back, but it was different from the others, which was a new species. Then you get these prettier antbirds. So this is a ferruginous antbird endemic to Atlantic forest. And this is a very special bird. This is a slender antbird. And this is restricted to a very specific biome, which is the transition between the dry forest, the Caatinga forest in the northeast Brazil, to the Atlantic rainforest. So this is a transition zone. and you get these rocky outcrops where have these terrestrial bromeliads and these ground cacti. And it's only in this one kind of habitat, it's called the Sipo di Mata habitat, is where the slender antbird is found. And it became the symbol of conservation for this particular habitat, this transition forest. And a lot of birds have been, new species have been discovered in this. And there is a classic place called Boa Nova in Brazil, where a lot of, when ornithologists started going in the late 90s, in the 80s and the 90s, and they found a lot of birds. And this one was one of them, the slender antbird. Then there are the more easier to see, somewhat easier to see and more widespread ones. This is one of them, the white-browed antbird. This is not that easy to see. This is an Esmeraldas antbird. And so Wayun and I were there, and Wayun got this picture, and we were very thrilled by this photograph. And you can see the same pattern of light, the dappled light. Esmeraldas antbird restricted to the Choco forest in Pacific Ecuador. Very little is known about this bird, not, probably a small population, and it tends to lurk. So we were pretty excited about this shot. And then this is a black-faced antbird, more common. Now, this one does follow army ants, not all the time, but it follows a few times. And then we actually get to the true army ant following birds, which are called the obligate antbirds, obligate ant followers, because you will never see them away from army ants. And this is one of them. This is a bicolored antbird. This is a Central American bird, and this was taken on the pipeline road in Panama. So they are invariably there with army ants. And this is another one. This is a spotted antbird. And in fact, perhaps most birders in Central America probably see this as their first antbird. Not that hard to see, and is typically around army ants. It's really pretty. And so, and this is perhaps one of the most studied antbirds because it's easier to observe. And then this is a nicer one. This is a a black spotted bear eye. So that's the name. It's probably not that hard to remember. It is an obligate army ant follower. This is from Peru. And I was pretty excited when I got the shot, even though we had the same problem with the backlighting. So those are the these are the antbirds. And in fact, the most special antbird that I have, I don't have a picture of. This was a white masked antbird. This was known from a specimen in the early 1900s. Then it was lost to science. And then in just a few years ago, it was rediscovered in this relatively remote area of Western Amazonia in Peru, up here. And then some birders found it closer to this town of San Lorenzo, which was more accessible. So in that same Northeast Peru trip that we saw the ant wren, we made sort of a small trip just to see this particular one. This is an army ant following bird. And it required taking a plane from Moyobamba, and we flew across these pristine forests to San Lorenzo. It was one of my most memorable experiences. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of that. So then we moved to the relatives of the antbirds. So these are the crescent chests, gnat eaters, tapaculos, and ant thrushes. They're all different families. They are all characterized by the fact they're all very hard to see and very hard to photograph, let alone, or very hard to see, let alone photograph. But they are very interesting ones. And this is a crescent chest. This is a collared crescent chest endemic to the Cerrado habitat, the grasslands, dry grasslands of eastern Brazil. At one time, they were considered to be tapaculos. Tapaculos are a set of birds which were they're terrestrial birds, low on the ground, very hard to see. And these things don't look anything like the tapaculos, but they belong to that family. So I was very excited about them. There are a few crescent chests in the eastern slope of Andes and isolated valleys. These are the gnat eaters. Gnat eaters are really special. Again, main thing with them is they're very hard to see. So anytime you get any kind of a photograph, you're excited. This is a black-cheeked gnat eater. You can see the structure is similar to an antbird. You'll see similar to ant pitters. So, but they are relatives of those. So this is a really pretty one. There are only like 5 or 6 species of gnat eaters in the world. This is a rufous gnat eater. It's more widespread on eastern Brazil. Again, anytime, if I had any picture of a gnat eater, I will include it. So I only have 3 species. So this is a rufous, and then this is a Ciara gnat eater, which was split from the rufous gnat eater. And this is endemic to a very small section of northeastern Brazil. And there are some differences here. You can see a more orangish throat compared to the rufous. So it's now split into its own species. very special birds. These things like hop around on the ground, they dart on branch to branch. And typically, you know, you do need playback on some of these. But even with the playback, you have to be really quick to see them. And then the tapaculos, and these are impossible to see. They have been designed not to be seen. Even getting a glimpse of a tapaculo is a big deal. And this is the only one that I have a photograph of. And what was really special about this is that in 2011, when Ashok and I were in Brazil for when we went and saw this bird, just a couple of years prior to that, it was considered extinct. And if you actually look at the birds of Brazil, it will say that the Bahia tapaculo is now extinct. And Ciro, our guide, actually was the one who found a small population. And we were among the first ones to photograph it. So it was a really thrilling moment. And the very fact that it was actually a tapaculo. I think this is perhaps an easier species to see. This is a rainforest, lowland rainforest tapaculo. Most of the other ones are up in the Andes, and they keep splitting them up. They don't migrate, they don't move. They're like little rats. They frankly are like little rats, avian rats. And they tend to be very local. So I think they're going into all these isolated valleys. They notice differences in their vocalizations. They all look very similar. They're all the same genus, Cytolopus, and they've been splitting them up. So now they're like up to 60 tapaculos now, and perhaps more to be found. So very interesting birds. And this, I threw this in just for the sake of for showing this. It's an entire different family, the ant thrushes. I don't have good photographs of it. They're so hard to see. And you know, I don't know what to do. I know we have some people on the probably who are listening right now who have excellent ant thrush photographs, but I'm not one of them. So then we move to the next family, ant pitters. Again, nothing to do with ants per se. These look like the pittas of the old world. So that's the name that was given to them. And the main thing with ant pitters, again, is that they have been designed not to be seen by humans or by birders. And but that has changed now. So when this picture was taken, and you can see 2004, this was in Ecuador. And all I had was essentially a point and shoot camera. And I believe I might have had put a bigger lens on it. And this is I was shooting on film. And so this is scanned from the film. And this is a giant ant pitta. And when I took this photograph, this was at least on the web. I couldn't find any other pictures of this bird. And a lot of ornithologists in South America asked me for this picture because they wanted to, they needed a picture to draw some plates from. And so at that time, this was just a mind-boggling shot of a giant ant pitta. Now, of course, they come to feeders. They come for worms, and they even have a name. The most famous giant ant pitta right now is a bird called Maria. And this is Angel Paz. You might have heard the name Angel Paz in Ecuador. He's the one who came up with this concept of feeding worms to these ant birds, and they started coming to him. This is another one of those ones which was very special. This was from Costa Rica, a thicket ant pitta. Again, it was like notorious not to be seen. And once we had a guide with us, and if we were sitting in a lodge, and the thicket ant pitta was calling in a bush, literally outside the lodge, and it was Jay Vandergast, if some of you know him. And he said, "I'm not even going to bother to try to call it in. I know it won't come out." So I was very thrilled when I just happened to have this bird drop into my lap in the Arenal Lodge area in Costa Rica. And again, this was at that time one of the only photographs of it. Now a lot more people have it. So I'm just showing some pictures and just showing how hard it was at one time to see ant pittas or take any pictures of them. This is an ochre-faced ant pitta from northeast Peru. It was also found in the 1970s, 1980s, relatively recent bird, very isolated and considered endangered. This is another one of those similar, same area. This is a pale-binned ant pitta, striking bird, very lot of character. This is in bamboo thickets on the top, on like ridges. This was another punishing hike to go see it. I was glad that I got even this kind of a photograph. And now, of course, what's happening is, this is another one, chestnut crowned. This is the best shot I have of, this is actually Vayun shot. This is Vayun shot in Ecuador. And this was a bird that was taken in the wild. Now what's happening is you're getting shots like this. And this is a chestnut-naped ant pitta, another Vayun shot. And this is a bird that comes to eat worms that the humans put out on a feeder, and it comes. And so now we can get really excellent pictures of ant pittas. And here's an example of that. So Vayun is shooting an ant pitta here. And if you can see it up here, it's right here. It's a Hokotoko ant pitta, which was a spectacular looking ant pitta. Here is it. And this was discovered by Robert Ridgely, sort of late, the end of the last century. And this became a symbol of conservation. There's a Hokotoco Foundation in Ecuador. So the discovery of this bird led to a lot of good things. And now we are lucky enough that because they are starting to come to the feeders, that you can get an opportunity to get pictures like that. So antpitters, really special birds. Then we come to this large family of over 300 birds, of ovenbirds and woodcreepers. So at one time, the ovenbirds and woodcreepers were two different families, but now they are considered, basically, they've been merged. And it makes a lot of sense because this is something that we had observed. This is a rufous-breasted leaf tosser. This is a ovenbird. And Ciro pointed this out when Ashok and I were in Brazil at the time. He said, this is a leaf tosser, but most of the time it seems to be hanging onto like it's creeping up barks like this. So there is a likelihood that this may be very similar to the woodcreepers or is related to the woodcreepers, and perhaps these things will merge together. And sure enough, this is now placed in the ovenbird family, but just above the woodcreepers. And there you can see somewhat of a similarity with this now. That this is the classic woodcreeper. This is the buff-throated woodcreeper. And I think for most people who go to the Amazon, this might be the very first woodcreeper they see. I typically find it very hard to photograph woodcreepers, and it's either just the way my hand, I can't keep my camera steady enough or what, but I tend to lose the focus on the bird, and I'll get very sharp photographs of the tree and out of focus shots of woodcreepers. So I don't have many pictures. Anytime I get any that's even a little bit in focus, I like to keep it. But this one was relatively decent, buff-throated woodcreeper. This is perhaps the best woodcreeper shot I have. This is a straight bill woodcreeper. So these are the classic woodcreepers, and they have a similar pattern of browns and some blacks, some streaks. But then this one has none of those. And this is a thrush-like woodcreeper. Now it's called the plain-winged woodcreeper. And this is a woodcreeper that looks very similar to an ovenbird. So you can see the similarities between the two. So I think it makes a lot of sense, that the current taxonomy makes a lot of sense. And then there's some of very interesting and sort of woodcreepers with a lot of personality. And this is an elegant woodcreeper from Peru. And I love this one. This is a white-throated woodcreeper with big honking bill. It's very interesting. And then this group, the Scythe Bills, are some of the most interesting ones with the scimitar-shaped bill. This is a black bill Scythe Bill from the Atlantic forest. But there is a red bill Scythe Bill, a brown bill Scythe Bill, and then the holy grail among the Scythe Bills is the greater Scythe Bill, which I've heard but not seen. Would love to see it, and it's a strangely rare bird. So yeah, some very interesting birds in that group. And then this looks like a woodcreeper, right? If I didn't tell you anything, you might very well think this is a woodcreeper, but this is a streaked xenops, which used to be considered an ovenbird. It's still in the same family. So now what has happened is that the woodcreepers are now placed right in between the leaf tossers and the xenops. And then we get to the classic ovenbirds. And the reason they're called ovenbirds is because a few of them build these round domed nests, and they look like ovens. So they are ovenbirds. In Spanish, it's hornero, because hornero is oven in Spanish, and fornared is the same. Is the true Latin is for an oven, fornared, or hornario is in Spanish. But anyway, so these birds are the horneros. This is a rufous hornero, and so a few of them actually build these nests, but the whole family got the name ovenbirds because of these. So this one is from Brazil, and this is a close relative of it. This is a pale-legged hornero. This is from Ecuador. This is a very characteristic site in certain parts of South America. You'll see these domed nests, not just inside like these kind of habitats inside trees, but you will even send them on telephone poles and electric poles. And it's a lot of fun when I see that. Other ovenbirds, this is up in the high Andes. This is the Cinclodes. And then there's a group of ovenbirds called the Foliage Cleaners. And that's just what they do. They glean from the foliage, so they're foliage gleaners. And so this is a black-capped foliage gleaner. This is endemic to Northeast Brazil. For some reason, I don't have a lot of pictures of foliage gleaners, even though they're relatively common. And they're just hard to photograph because they're up in this sort of habitat inside the clumps of leaves, etc. And then the funny thing with ovenbirds is the names, right? Foliage cleaner. Then there are things called stream creeper, palm creeper, reed haunter, wood haunter, firewood gatherer. That's actually a bird, a firewood gatherer. So very fanciful names. And this one is called a recurve bill. This is a Peruvian recurve bill. It wasn't very well known. It still isn't very well known, and it's only found in these bamboo thickets in southeast Peru and adjoining parts of Brazil and Bolivia. So I was extremely excited when I got this photograph. And it's just the name is the Recurve Bill. Nothing more to say about it. It's just that it's extremely rare and it's isolated into these bamboo clumps. This is one of the birds with those fanciful names. It's a tree hunter. This is a streak-capped tree hunter. This is from Ecuador. Vayun's picture. This one actually was coming to a feeder. There's a feeder of moths. So you put up a sheet at night, and the white sheet, moths come there, and where they're still there in the morning, some of these birds come there to pick the moths off that sheet. And this is one of them. And this is that habitat in southeast Peru where you get these bamboo clumps are on the sides, and you go through those bamboo clumps and you get things like the recurve bill. This is another foliage, ovenbird. It's called a thorn bird. So there's nothing much about the bird. It's a very small bird, and you can barely see it here. It's a rufous-fronted thorn bird. But look at the size of the nest. So these are structures you will see, and apparently it's like intricate tunnels and side chambers and all kinds of things are going on. This tiny bird can make this huge nest. And then this was a very interesting bird. This is called a spring-legged gravitiero. And I apologize for the picture, but you will understand the reason I included it, because this bird was only found in the 1990s. This is the nest it builds. So you would think that, well, it shouldn't be that hard to find this if it's especially around its nest. But until the 1990s, it went unnoticed. Nobody even bothered to pay attention to it. Even though when you look at it closely, it does have some differences like these pink legs. But this is a classic example of something that was right under everybody's noses, and it was just ignored. It was just never noticed. And in the 1990s, this was found in Northeast Brazil, in the Atlantic forest of the Northeast Brazil. And it's in a very small area. It's entirely dependent on the canopy of cocoa farms. So the reason it still survives is, even though the natural forest is pretty much gone, cocoa, shade-grown cocoa, you still have the high canopy, and in that, the spring-legged gravitiero resides there. So I thought this was like a legendary bird, so I was excited to just get any kind of a shot. And this is that habitat that I was talking about. You can see this is the Atlantic forest. What's left, little patches here, highly fragmented, and even though some of this looks like forest, it actually is a cocoa plantation underneath that. Some more foliage cleaners. This is a bobtail. And then finally, there's a large group of ovenbirds, which are called spinetails. And this is one of them, a yellow-chinned spinetail. So very interesting set of species, but perhaps very dull looking. And then you get to something that's a lot more colorful and exciting, and that's the mannequins. And so mannequins are tiny birds. The family by itself. This is actually the first mannequin I ever saw. This was a golden-headed mannequin. We saw this photograph was taken a lot later. The first time I saw it was my first trip to Peru. It was a golden-headed mannequin, and I was pretty excited when I basically was found it myself, and I ran into a little lek of these. So the mannequins display in leks. They have very elaborate breeding behaviors and breeding displays, and that is what has led to this extreme sexual dimorphism, where the males are very showy. They have these very intricate display behaviors that they do in these little theaters, which are called leks. So they all collect together, do these little dances and displays, and then the females come and pick their suitors. And that has led to this extreme dimorphism. So this is one of them, the golden-headed. This is the classic Central American mannequin. This is a red-cap mannequin, and you'll find YouTube videos of these birds essentially moonwalking on branches and putting on these elaborate displays. And this is one of the most studied of the mannequins. And then there's a group of mannequins which are blue-backed. And they're spread all over the Neotropics, all the way from the Andes to southeast Brazil. And this one is actually called the blue-backed manakin. And this one was from Trinidad. This is a relative of that in southeast Brazil. This is called the swallowtail mannequin. Lovely bird. And this was discovered by the early explorers to the New World. This was one of the first mannequins they saw. So this is one of the mannequins that has been studied a lot. And it also has a very interesting and intricate display. This is Wayun's shot of a golden winged mannequin. This was one of my more sought after mannequins, and I couldn't get a shot. He managed to. Nice little tuft up here. This is found in Ecuador and in Colombia. A bandtail mannequin. This is pretty widespread, and this particular one is an isolated population in Northeast Brazil. But you can get the idea of these tiny birds, beautiful, and why they are so sought after. And then this next set I enjoy a lot because there's 4 species which are very similar to each other, in sort of the genetics, even though they look slightly different, and they do interbreed, and they're all mostly in Central America. So this is a white-collared mannequin. This is from Belize and north in Mexico and Belize. This is an orange-collared mannequin. You can see some similarities here, except like for the orange. And then this one is in the Pacific coast of Costa Rica. This is a golden-collared mannequin. This is from Panama. And then this is a white-bearded mannequin, which is fairly widespread. So I really like it when I can sort of complete the whole set. So these mannequins, I got all 4 of them, even though this one is more like a record shot. But when I'm able to get like a whole set of birds like that, it's pretty exciting. This is to show the sexual dimorphism. So that's the male, and this is the female. You can see how different this is. And that brings us to a very interesting question. And maybe we can talk about that in our in the Q&A. This is a pin-tailed mannequin, but this is a female. Now, it's not bad looking, but if you were to actually go Google and you search for a male pin-tailed mannequin, you will see how amazing it is. And this is endemic to Brazil. Very hard to see because of their vocal. They're not very loud birds, but it gives you that dilemma of would you be satisfied if you only saw the female? You get the click, you get the tick, but you still haven't seen the spectacular male. When talking about spectacular mannequins, this is one of them. This is the Araripe mannequin, and this was discovered 1995. Can you imagine a bird like this was only discovered in 1995 on a very small area? That area is at one time when we were there. This is Ashok and I in the same trip, Brazil trip. I calculated based upon the map range of the maps that it was maybe 26 square kilometers, which is the size of Palo Alto. That the entire global range of this bird was the size of Palo Alto. Now a few more populations have been discovered, so maybe it's a little bigger than that. It's a very highly isolated pinprick of a place in the Araripe Plateau. And this is the Araripe Plateau, and this is found only on the mid slopes of this. And I think somebody has reported them on the top of the plateau, so maybe now there's a few more of them. But otherwise, this is the only place where the forest is left. Otherwise it's been completely developed. So beautiful bird. And interestingly enough, you can see the similarity of that to this guy. So this is the Araripe mannequin, and this is a helmeted mannequin, which has a much bigger range in eastern central Brazil. And you can see the similarity. They don't overlap. The closest they come to each other is about 100 miles. And so on the same trip, we did see this one. And it's perhaps not that hard to imagine that maybe some pioneering helmeted mannequins made it to that Araripe Plateau, and then eventually they diverged. So those were the more spectacular looking mannequins, and this is really the really dull ones. This is a pale-bellied tyrant mannequin. The funny thing is when you look at descriptions of it, they will say there is literally nothing remarkable about the plumage of this bird. And that probably describes it very well. And it actually looks a lot like flycatchers, but it is a mannequin. So then we go to the Gotengas. These are the birds of paradise of the Neotropics. They are related to mannequins, and in some ways, some of them look like bigger, just like big mannequins, but they are a different family. And then this is the one that that everybody probably knows and sees. This is the cock of the rock. This is from Ecuador, from a lek in Ecuador. This is the national bird of Peru. These Andean cock of the rocks go all the way from Venezuela, all the way to Bolivia along the Andes. Spectacular bird, size of a crow. It's quite a spectacle to see them at a lek. At one time, the only way to see them would be to go to a lek. Now, I think as more and more birders are spreading around, you do see them flying around or foraging for fruit, but the best way to photograph them is on the lek. My best experience with that prior to that photograph was in Machu Picchu. This is the town of Agua Calientes, where the hotel is, the Machu Picchu Pueblo, where we were staying. And then this bird was foraging right outside our window. Initially, I thought it was a flower. And then Vayun said, no, it's not a flower, it's a bird. And then I realized it was actually the cock of the rock. So this is an example of an isolated bird, not on a lek. So I was thrilled when I got to see, take a photograph of it eating a fruit. Very special birds. But then there is something even more special in my mind, which is the Guianan cock of the rock. This is found in the Guianan highlands. It likes to nest on rocky cliffs and caves. This is that picture from my very early trip. Again, it was with a simple camera, point and shoot, and then I took it on a slide film and I scanned it. But it's enough, I'm sure, to give you a sense of what that bird looks like. And imagine that in a deep, dark forest, you suddenly see these orange glowing birds and putting on a show at a lek, a very special bird. And this was one of my more sought after birds. This is a black-necked red Gotenga, another one of these big red Gotengas. This one actually is called a red Gotenga. Strangely, little is known about it. This was in the same trip as that Antbird. And even though I missed the white-masked Antbird, I was pretty happy that I actually got a photograph of at least this guy, the black-necked red Gotenga. And there's a close relative of it, the Guianan red Gotenga, which I've only seen once, and it was just a flyby bird, just happened to look up on a trail, and a Guianan red Gotenga was flying over my head. But that was before I had a camera. So one day maybe we'll get that. And then the umbrella birds. There's very little I can say about how spectacular these birds are. This is a long-wattled umbrella bird, but my first experience with an umbrella bird was something similar to this. It was an Amazonian umbrella bird on my very first trip to Peru. We were on Oxbow Lake early in the morning, and the umbrella birds were sitting on top of tall trees exposed against the sky and putting on a display. And so on that very first trip, I saw the Amazonian umbrella birds quite a few times. So I thought maybe it's not a rare bird. But after that, didn't see any of them. There are 3 of these. And the second one, so this is the actual Amazonian umbrella bird. We finally caught up with a photograph in Ecuador. This is a female. The male looks somewhat similar to this. But then umbrella birds became very hard for me to see. And then this is a bare-necked umbrella bird from Costa Rica. So this was the first photograph that I got, but the second umbrella bird, super excited to see it. They're just strangely very hard to see and very rare. But you can see that, there's no reason why they should be so difficult to see. They're large, like a crow-sized bird, and they're very different. And then this is the long-wattled umbrella bird, the third of the trio that Vayun and I saw on our last trip to Ecuador. And we actually saw one in full display. So this pouch that you see, it fills it up with air, and then it lets out a sound as it deflates this thing. So I'll go back here. So these are a sequence of 3 photographs. So long-wattled umbrella bird. This is sort of endangered, or at least threatened. This likes the Pacific slope forests, which are now being cut down. And there are only a few patches left. And this is from a Bonaventura reserve in Pacific Ecuador. So those were the Gotengas, which put on these elaborate displays. They have intricate plumages, but not all of them actually have sounds, so have the looks. This is a screaming piha, and what it lacks in looks, it makes up in sound. It's one of the loudest birds. And this is the sound of the rainforest. If you see any movie that claims to be shot in South America, you will hear the screaming pihas in the background. Very hard to see, so because they just blend into the background, and their sounds are like ventriloquist sounds that it could be coming from anywhere. And then you get these bellbirds, which have the best of both worlds, very loud and interesting calls, as well as interesting looks. So this is a bearded bellbird. This was great to see it up close, because typically you'll see these bellbirds or Gotengas in a scene like this. So up here, this little guy there, that's the bearded Gotenga. And traditionally, that's how you would see the Gotengas. Now with more guides and more bird lodges, it's becoming easier to see some of them. And so this was a trip to Panama. This is with family. And we were out here trying to see a blue Gotenga. And this is a canopy tower at the Pipeline Road in Panama. And we were pretty thrilled after we saw this bird because this was a main target. This is the blue Gotenga. So there is a group of these blue Gotengas that are spread all the way from Belize to Brazil. And in Belize and Mexico, it's called the lovely Gotenga. Then you come to Panama, it's called is this one, which is the blue Gotenga. And this was, we were also experimenting with digiscoping. So this is what we could get with a digiscope. For some reason, these blue Gotengas don't come to any kind of a feeder. So you just have to see them far away. This is a very rare one. This is a Turquoise Gotenga. This is only from the Pacific slope of Costa Rica, barely making it to Panama. So any kind of a shot was exciting about. And then this is a very special bird. This is a banded Gotenga. This is the only shot I have that's not mine or Wayun's. This is Ashok's shot. I was right next to him. He managed to get this shot, but I couldn't. But you can see the similarities to those other Gotengas. This one is a highly endangered bird. And this is in the same forest. We saw this one. This is another endangered bird. This is called the white-winged Gotenga. Somewhat related to that group, but is different, but a similar behavior. And then at one time, this was my most special shot. This is actually a composite. This is a yellow-billed Gotenga, endemic to Costa Rica and just barely makes it into Panama. Endangered bird. When I took this one, there was no flight shot of this species. This is only in the mangroves of Costa Rica. And it's rare to see an all-white bird, which is not like a water bird. This is one of them. There are actually 3 white Gotengas like this. And this is the one that's in Pacific coast of Costa Rica, yellow-billed. And this photograph was, people requested me from this, and there was a book called The Rare Birds of the World. And some of the other online sources at the time when I took this one, this was the only flight shot. Now, actually, there are a lot more. I was checking eBird. There are a lot more shots now of this bird in flight. And then finally, one of the more common Gotengas, this is the purple-throated fruit crow. So hopefully that gives you a sense of the Gotengas, which are the more spectacular looking of the neotropical birds. I'm going to pick up the pace here. Chittaras and Allies. So at one time, this group of birds was considered a mix between flycatchers and antbirds. So this is a masked Chittara, this is a black-tailed Chittara. And then this family of birds, along with the Chittaras, there's like a miscellaneous family. So this is a group called Chiffornesses, or thrush-like mannequins. And this is a foothill Chifforness. Very rare bird, very little is known about it. And this is this photograph that Wayun took in our trip to Ecuador. It actually is still one of the better photographs of the species, and it's used as part of the description in the Bird of the World. So he's been pretty excited about having this photograph. This is a cinereous mourner, relatively nondescript bird. Once it was considered a Gotenga, now it's put under its own, it's put along with the Chittaras. And then these are Beckards. At one time, they were considered small, tiny little Gotengas, and at one time they were flycatchers. Now they are placed with this group. This is the classic black and white Beckard. This is a black cap Beckard, and then this is a more attractive one. This is a greenback Beckard. So then another group of birds, which people have been trying to figure out where to place them, and they just made a family out of them, the sharp-billed royal flycatchers and allies. And this is the sharp-bill. This is a very strange bird, and it has been in a family by itself. It was a Gotenga at one time. People thought it was a flycatcher, and it's strange. It is a very strange range map. It's in parts of Costa Rica and Panama. It's in the Guyanas, in the Andes, and Southeast Brazil. And I never managed to see it, even though perhaps it's theoretically it's possible almost anywhere I have been because of his very weird range. So when we saw this in Southeast Brazil, we saw actually 3 of them together. There's 2 of them. It was pretty exciting. You can see it, it has certain Gotenga-like features, that structure of the body, but the bill is very sharp, it's a sharp bill. And then the large family of flycatchers. I mean, if people think about the Neotropics, I think you have to think about the flycatchers. This is the Western flycatcher. And this is obviously only here and into Mexico. We have the black phoebe. this goes all the way into South America. So we are familiar with flycatchers. So flycatchers they do exist in the Northern Hemisphere, but they are believed to have evolved in South America and then moved up. And in South America is where they get the largest diversity. And this is an example of that diversity. This is a spade bill. This is a white-throated spade bill, and this is a golden-crowned spade bill. I was just very thrilled with the fact that I managed to get in shot of those, because spade bills tend to get overlooked. Unless you know the call and they only sing in the mornings, they're easy to miss. So it's very exciting to see these very tiny birds with these big bills. This is a typical nondescript flycatcher. This is a slaty-capped flycatcher. And there are probably 100 birds that look somewhat similar. If you throw in the Tyrannolets and the Elenias and some of the Emperornax flycatchers, so many of them have this general pattern. This is one of them. This is a Bahia Granulate, highly endangered bird, recently discovered from the same patch of forest where the spring-legged Gravitiero was. When I took this photograph, at that time, this was the best photograph. Since then, Ciro has taken a lot more. But it was pretty exciting. Fairly typical of the Tyrannolets, which look very similar. You just need to know the calls and you need to know their ranges. This is a Tumbes Tyrannolate. At one time, this was considered the mouse-colored Tyrannolate, and then mouse-colored was now split into different things. Tumbes region of Ecuador. Then you get into these fancy names of pygmy tyrants, bamboo tyrants, toady flycatchers, toady tyrants. And so this is a pearly vented bamboo tyrant, which is now called the pearly vented toady tyrant. So they're tiny birds. They look like the toadies of the Caribbean. So maybe that's why they're called toady tyrants. There are toady flycatchers. This is one of them. This is a Johnson's toady flycatcher. Sorry, toady tyrant. So Johnson's toady tyrant. This is endemic to Peru. This is a white-cheeked toady tyrant. This is Peru and Bolivia. Again, it's found in those bamboo thickets as a Peruvian recurve bill. Very hard to see. So we're excited to get any kind of a shot. And then this is a black and white toady tyrant, a lot more common than the other ones, but still has a lot of color. And the male and the females are very different from each other. This is a toady flycatcher. It's a common toady flycatcher. This is fairly common all the way from Central America to South America. They build these typical hanging nests using spider webs. And so that's why I love this shot. We actually have one in construction, and I especially like this one where the pair are together. And then this is endemic to the Atlantic forest. It's a counterpart of this bird, but in the Atlantic forest of Brazil, this is called a yellow-lored toady flycatcher. I'll keep going with flycatchers. Some of these may get split into their own. This is a cliff flycatcher. This is the Brazilian subspecies. This actually looks like a swallow, if you see the wings here. And it's the genus name is Hirundiniae, after the swallows. So sometimes people call this a swallow flycatcher. And then this is the eastern subspecies in Peru of the cliff flycatcher. These are out fairly, they stay in the open. They can be in human habitations. This is an ornate flycatcher. This is one of the prettier ones. It might get split into its own family sometime. And then this is that the Cerrado habitat in eastern Brazil, where that one morning when we were in this thing on the outskirts of Diamantina National Park, we got 3 special birds, one after the other. This is a gray-backed tachuri. This is a sharp-tailed grass tyrant. And this is a rufous-sided pygmy tyrant. So all 3 are very rare. They're not rare in the right habitat, but they're very localized habitats, endemic to that sort of a dry Cerrado habitat. So it was pretty exciting to see all 3 of them together. This is a tufted flycatcher from Panama, vermilion. We all know that. Sriram just took a great shot of that just this weekend, right? This makes it up into North America. So a couple of these things break the pattern of the olive and the browns. And then this is one of them. This is a masked water tyrant. It's one of the rarer, not rare, it's unusual in the fact that it has a lot of white in it. And then these are Andean flycatchers. This is a chat tyrant. So this is a rufous-breasted chat tyrant. Different shape. I love these chat tyrants a lot because they have some pretty patterns of colors and high in the Andes. This is a long-tailed tyrant, very different. Myarchus flycatchers. This is a Las Sagras. This is all over the Caribbean. And Myarchuses come all the way up here. Ash-throated flycatcher is one of them. And then the Kiskadis. You can't go south of the Rio Grande Valley without seeing a Kiskadee anywhere, right? So this is the great Kiskadee that looks a little bit like a shrike. They behave like shrikes and jays, but they're one of the more visible flycatchers. Then there's some of the relatives of that which follow the same color pattern. This is a rusty margin flycatcher. It's much smaller. It can balance itself on these water vegetation. This is from Panama. And this is a social flycatcher all over the Neotropics, everywhere. Same pattern as a Kiskadee. Some people believe that this dark mask helps reduce the glare when they're catching insects. So perhaps that's why this pattern repeats itself. And then the tropical kingbird, everywhere in the tropics. And now, of course, they're making all their way up to Palo Alto. And then these last three birds are the true tyrant flycatchers. They're the genus Tyrannus. And this is a scissor-tail flycatcher. It's in Texas as well as into Central America. And then this is the more southern form of that, which is the fork-tail flycatcher. They migrate, and sometimes they can be in large groups. And so I've actually seen 100 of them together on the mouth of the Rio Madeira. When the Madeira meets the Amazon, it forms these islands. And we happen to be there at the right time of the year when there was a migrant passage of these fork-tail flycatchers. So imagine a lot of these acrobatically flying around you. Crows, jays, and magpies. Interestingly enough, there are no crows south of the Mexican, right of the northern Mexico, you get the Chihuahuan raven and the Tamaulipas crow. After that, there are no crows. There are no crows in South America. You do get a few jays. And this is a brown jay, which is all over Central America. This is the green jay, which has now been split. This is the Inca jay from Peru. So jays, even though we have some interesting jays in North America, it's actually when you go into the south, in the Neotropics, when you get some of the more colorful ones. And this is a group of very beautiful blue jays. This is a turquoise jay from the foothills of the Andes. It's like blue mixed in, like the blue stands out. And then these ones, this is a white-throated magpie jay. This is on the Pacific slope of Costa Rica. Very nice looking bird. And something similar to that, that's a white-naped jay from endemic to Brazil. And then this is perhaps the more visible of all the jays in South America. None of them are common. None of them are easily, you don't see a lot of them. And this one, the violaceous jays, is perhaps the one you'll see the most when in the Amazon. There's a group of birds which have some of them have representatives in North America and some in South America. This is a bird by itself, the Dona corbeus. It's its own family. At one time, it was considered related to the wrens. You get the gnat wrens. And then these gnat wrens are similar to the gnat catchers. So again, nothing really that wren-like about it, other than perhaps a structure. Its closest relative is the Nat Eaters. And this is a tropical Nat Eater, not that different from the blue-gray Nat Eater that we have. And then the wrens. In fact, the diversity of wrens increases when you go south of the border. So while we have a good number of wrens, including a house wren, and then this is actually a house, this is a farm. This is not the house wren. So this is a plain wren, but the house wren also makes it all the way to South America. Some people split it into a southern wren. And then this is a plain-tailed wren, plain wren, which has been split into multiple forms. So this is one of them. But you can see the pattern is very similar to a house wren. This is a Yucatan wren, endemic to the Yucatan, looks very similar to a cactus wren of North America. And then a very interesting wren, which is associated with Machu Picchu. This is called the Inca wren, because this is where it was discovered. It was literally discovered by some birders who were out here, ornithologists, who were in Machu Picchu when they found a wren, and they say, well, this wren doesn't look like or sound like any of the other wrens. And still the best place to see the Inca wren is Machu Picchu. And then this is a gray-breasted wood wren. This is perhaps the most widespread of the neotropical wrens, anywhere in the foothills. So I'm looking at the time now. I think it's 1 hour. But I haven't started on the tanagers. So I'm just going to quickly fly through them, if you will have patience with me, and the group of birds, which are the tanagers and their relatives. So in this group, the euphonias are one of them, which are now merged with the finches. So tiny birds, fruit eaters, and they're very important fruit dispersers of fruit. And they take these berries and crunch them. This is a tawny-crowned euphonia from Panama. This is a thick-billed euphonia from Ecuador. and this is the female. So this is one group where the male and females have strong dimorphism. The females look very similar. Thick-billed Euphonia, I'm getting them confused now. This is the violaceous Euphonia. You can see they're very similar. There are like 10 to 15 species. Some of them overlap each other, and they're very similar to each other. This is a violaceous Euphonia from Brazil. And then this is a relative of these. It's a Chlorophonia. Spectacular colors. Now they come to the feeders, which is why you can get a photograph like that, but they just glow. There's something about their plumage that glows in the light. We have New World sparrows. So this is a classic sparrow from South America, the yellow-browed sparrow. This is related to the grasshopper sparrows that we have. And this is a rufous-collared sparrow. You cannot go anywhere in the Andes without seeing it. This is a relative of our white-throated, the Zonotrochias, the white-throated, white-crowned, golden-crowned group. Bush tanagers are now lumped into the sparrows. This is a sooty-capped bush tanager from Costa Rica. You can see some, the New World sparrows, as you go south of the border, they become bigger, become more colorful. This is a São Francisco sparrow endemic to a very small region of Brazil. So that's why I like this photograph. But you can see the similarity it has to some of the brush finches. Like this one is a chestnut cap brush finch from Ecuador. And this is a yellow-breasted brush finch, very common across the Andes. Then among the tanagers, a few have been split out into their own families. This is one of them. This is a Western spindalis. This is a group of birds that's endemic to the Caribbean. So it's like a tanager, but it's its own family. Very beautiful bird. This one is from Bahamas. And then this is a bird by itself has been created. A whole family has been created for it, a dusky-faced tanager. Blackbirds. So troupials, they're called, troupials fall in that group, but they are the blackbirds. So this is our Western meadowlark, and a relative of that is the red-breasted meadowlark from Panama South. And you can see the similarity of that, Costa Rica South. This is a typical site you'll see, especially in the Amazon, these Oropendula nests. So they are colonial nesters that nest in these hanging nests. And this is a very typical site when you're traveling along rivers. And then this is one of those classic Oropendulas, a crested Oropendula. This is a dusky green Oropendula. So these are big, giant blackbirds, essentially. And then this is a Central American form, the Montezuma Oropendula. This is a yellow rum cacique, smaller forms all over. And then among the orioles, there are orioles which are, they are the same genus as our orioles. This is a troupial. This is the Brazilian troupial, very colorful. And then this is also a blackbird, so totally nondescript. It looks like some sort of a female blackbird, but it's its own species. It's called the bay-wing. So this is the plain bay-wing. And then finally, a group of birds, the cowbirds. This is a shiny cowbird. This is basically the counterpart of a brown-headed cowbird. And it parasitizes the nests of other species. And I think up to 70 species, it lays its eggs in up to 70 species. This is considered a problem, especially for, it's a risk and it's moved into North America now. Cardinals. So our tanagers are now considered cardinals. So this is a summer tanager. It's in the cardinal family. This is a yellow-green grosbeak from Brazil. And this is an ultramarine grosbeak. So you can see this is very similar to a blue grosbeak. So our grosbeaks are indigo bunting, lazuli bunting. Those are all now considered cardinals, Western tanager. But this is the blue grosbeak's counterpart in South America. And then funnily enough, among the tanagers, our cardinals are now in the tanagers. So our northern cardinal and Pyrrholoxia, they're actually now considered tanagers. So this is a red-crested cardinal from South America. This is now in Hawaii. You can see the similarity to the northern cardinal. And this is a red-cowed cardinal. This is endemic to Northeast Brazil. Sorry. So this is our last family of birds. So I'll be very quick here, but I quickly go through all of them. I hope everyone is still with me.
Oh, we are, yeah.
Okay, sorry for going long, but
no, not at all.
Let me see, how do I get back into the slideshow mode? All right. So 300 plus tanagers. After the flycatchers, this group, the tanagers, is the largest family. But these are the gems of the neotropic passerines, and you'll see why. So red-cowled cardinal, This is a white-capped tanager. This is from the Andes. It's somewhat, for some reason, it's rare. And it's the first time I saw it was in this recent trip to Ecuador. I was pretty excited. Very different looking from other tanagers. Has a lot of character. These are fairly nondescript. They're all over. This is a white line tanager. You see the white line on the wings down here. This is the male, and this is the female. There are several birds which are similar to those. And one of the close relatives of this is the silver-beaked tanager. This is like the trash bird. You go to the Amazon, this is everywhere. But there is a group of birds like the silver-beaked. And so they divide up the Neotropics among them. And so the female here is this is the female of the silver-beak. So this is a close relative of that. This is the crimson hooded this is the crimson hooded tanager. This is from Costa Rica. So 4 or 5 species similar to the silver-beak. There's a Brazilian tanager, there's a Huallaga tanager. So they don't overlap with each other. There's a crimson back tanager, but very similar to this very common silver-beak tanager. This is a very special bird. This is the orange-throated tanager. This was discovered by John O'Neill in 1960s, a famous ornithologist, John O'Neill. And it was found in a very small part of Peru. And then many years later, his student, Ted Parker, found it in Ecuador. So where we saw this bird was actually in Ecuador. But when this was discovered in 1960, people had thought that all the birds that were to be found had been found. And when this young graduate student, John O'Neill, goes and finds a completely different looking bird, it opened the eyes that maybe there's a lot to be found. So this was always one of my most sought after birds. It's in this special part of the southern Ecuadorian border of Peru called the Cordillera Condor. This is actually the border of Peru and Ecuador, and it is Tepuy-like highlands, and this bird is restricted to that. And at one time it was impossible to get to. That's why it was just a dream to see. Now the roads are being built, so now you can drive up to a lodge. But the downside of the roads being built is then you start seeing the destruction. So the gold mining has come into these pristine forests there. But that's the story of what's happening in the tropics. So some of the tanagers from the Andes. This is a blue-capped, it's a common one. Mountain tanager. So this is the blue-winged mountain tanager. It comes to feeders now. It's a black-chin mountain tanager. This is endemic to Ecuador. This is a lacrimose mountain tanager. So there are 4 or 5 of this species, this genus. Very pretty birds, very nice. And then these are my favorites. These are the Aerie Dardnesses. And you can see this picture. This was in Ecuador. It was a gray morning, and we saw this flock of birds. And this was like blue glowing in that gray morning. And then these are mixed. These are part of mixed species flocks. These particular golden crowned tanagers, the Aerie Dardnesses. You can see this brush finch in the back. So these Andean tanagers are very special. And then this is the trash bird. This is the blue-gray tanager. This is Wayun's picture, but you can see it's actually very pretty. They are all over from Mexico south all the way to Brazil. There are multiple subspecies, but then there are other relatives there. So this is another group where I got all of those species except one of them. This is Sayaka tanager. This is a counterpart of that in southern South America. This is an azure-winged tanager, and this is a golden chevron tanager. And then up in Mexico, there is this yellow-winged tanager. So there's only one of them left is a glaucous tanager from Venezuela. So very nice birds. And then finally the Tangaras. So these are the real gems. At one time, there were 40 species in the genus called Tangara. Now they've been split up into different groups. But this is by itself now. This is the golden-naped tanager. There's a silvery tanager or silverback tanager, burnished buff tanager, mask tanager, saffron crown tanager. So, and this is the southeast Atlantic form of the opal crown tanager. This is now called the silver belly tanager. So you'll notice a difference. All of these things were close up, and that's because they were at feeders. So when they come to the feeders, you can get a shot of those. Most of the tanagers otherwise out in the wild. This is probably the best I could ever do with a tanager like this that was not coming to a feeder. So the ones I'm including now are only the ones that have been coming to feeders, but these birds are beautiful. These are tiny birds, they just glow. This is a yellow-green tanager from the lowlands, golden tanager. There are different subspecies. That's the western, this is the eastern slope, this is the western slope. Saffron crown tanager, golden eared tanager, and then in southeast Brazil, there's 2 of them were spectacular. There's like the colors of the rainbow. This is a green-headed tanager. 2 shots of that because I can't get enough of them. And then the red necked tanager. Close relatives of those Tangaras, this is a Guira tanager, and then this is a rufous-headed tanager. Now this is a different genus. These are the Dardnesses. This is a common blue Dardness. This came to the feeder. It's a common feeder bird. This one is not, a black-faced Dardness from the lowlands of Amazon. Red-legged honeycreeper, favorite for bird watchers and photographers at feeders. And a counterpart of that, this is the the purple honeycreeper. And this is the female. So the male and the females are very different. Green honeycreeper, they're all over at feeders, very bold birds, very colorful. Flower piercers. So this shot is a slaty flower piercer, but this is showing you the behavior. They, instead of feeding on the nectar from drinking the nectar like a hummingbird, they come in from the side and steal it. So I'm not sure what ecological purpose they solve, but they are there. And there's some very nice ones like this white-sided flower piercer and masked flower piercer. The finches are here. This is the yellow finch or the saffron finch. And then these things look like sparrows. They're at one time, I think they were lumped with sparrows, but this is a wedge-tailed grass finch. This is from Panama. And this is an endemic of Brazil, the pale-bellied pampa finch or serra finch. Grass quits, very tiny, tiny birds. So they're impossible to photograph. So this is one time I saw one sit up on a wire for a few seconds. Was very happy with that blue-black grass quit. Seed eaters, tiny birds. This one is, you can actually see it's doing its behavior. This is chestnut-bellied seed eater, variable seed eater. So the seed eaters are now with the tanagers, and then a few more associated birds, with different colors. This is a red-crested finch from Central South America, but it also has a population in the Andes. Banana quits were a family by themselves. Now they are considered tanagers. There are 39 subspecies of banana quits. You cannot go anywhere without seeing one. And there are various forms. This is you can see this is from Trinidad. You can see the gray cheek on this, the gray throat, and this one has a white throat. This is from Belize. And finally, so this is my last 2 birds here. This is a Cuban grass quit. This is endemic to Cuba, but it's been introduced in a few places like Bahamas. And when I saw it, I was just blown away. Looking at a picture in a field guide was nothing like seeing it in the field. And then surprisingly, this is my last bird. It looks a little nondescript, but I just could not believe it when I saw this bird. Like, what is this thing? This is a Greater Antillean bullfinch. It's in the tanager family now. It's endemic to the Caribbean, but it was another one of those I was barely aware of it. And you're in the field and you see the bird, and then it just hits you. so I'll stop there just with this one because this is a special bird. I covered maybe 200 species, probably a little bit more, out of 2,000. So you only got a sense of 10% of the passerines of the Neotropics. But hopefully it gives you a sense of what makes them special. I'll stop.
Thank you, Vivek. I can just say, wow, that's all. I don't have words for you. This was just spectacular. Fantastic talk, by the way.
Well, I hope I didn't keep everyone too long. So thanks for staying with me.
Oh, no, I think we are still here. Yeah, I'm just going to see, please, if you have any questions, please let me know or let Vivek know, put it in the chat. If I don't, maybe I'll just prompt everybody here. So for your trips, you said you were mostly birding in the front part of your career, essentially with the binoculars. And then you started getting excited about doing photography at some point, or is it just your son carrying a camera with you? And
No. I got into it just when the kids were born. I think around 2006, and I think it was a few folks here helped me get more into it, like Bill Walker. I used to just do some. I was experimenting with digiscoping, and I was with Bill Walker and the Ogier Ponds, and he was next to me with his big 500 or 600, whatever he was carrying at that time, and we were looking at a glaucous gull. And it has a bicolored bill, a young glaucous gull, right? And I could barely make it out through my digiscope. And with his lens, he actually could see enough of that. So that's when I saw the power of that. So then I bought a little SLR for myself, 400 lens. Ashok advised me, and he said a 400 is good enough, 400 5.6, because it's super sharp. So that's what I carried for the longest time. And even now, I basically have the 100 400.
Okay. Okay.
And yeah, and then once my son got into it, then became he's a great partner to have, because then I can focus on finding the birds because I know he can take the photographs. So that works out very well for us.
Now he's going to college.
You know, I was going to college.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, I heard his presentation last year. It was just superb. You're getting a lot of compliments in the chat. No questions yet.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I think I do have to say maybe another request from you. I think the last bit was a little bit rushed in the sense that you're going through the species. That in itself looks like a presentation. I mean, the tanagers are just spectacular looking, right? They're just beautiful.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I mean, in fact, I didn't show, maybe, you know, I have probably half as many that I didn't even touch today that are sitting in another folder. So I was wondering that, you know, you could do a talk on tanagers alone, and could be, because they are also very good photographic subjects.
Yeah.
Right? And even flycatchers are enough to do a talk. So I'll be open to it if you have some slots in the future. I'm happy to.
Absolutely, we are open. In fact, one of the recommendations is I'm going to ask people here to recommend me, you know, speakers, and like I told you, I'm very happy to have repeat speakers too. And one of my first requests is actually to have Steve also present his stories. He takes pictures. He rarely ever shows them here, so he's going to be one of my first few speakers, in fact. So there is
yeah, I saw the question. So you mostly go to reserves and lodges by yourself in the field, or the best photos are feeders? Yeah, so it's a combination. I've done by myself. I've done it with just like a private guide, you know, and also I've done the group tour groups. So the tour groups are hard, you know, because then you're with a group and everyone may not be into photography, and then it's a balance. So when I've done that, I've checked with them, checked with the guides. I said, is it okay if I bring my camera along? And, you know, usually they're okay with it, with some balance. But it is the case that, you know, and often you come there, you'll realize that you see a lot of birds, but the best photographs were the ones at the feeders. So you do want to maximize your time at the feeders, right? And often it comes at the cost of a very quick lunch or a very quick breakfast because you want to get back quickly to the feeders. Yeah, but that often happens. And I was advising Vayu when we were there. I was like, when we are at a feeder and the tanagers are coming or the hummingbirds are coming, make the most of it. Right? And if you get something different, like a guan will come in, or an oropendula, get them when they are still on the natural vegetation before they jump onto the feeder platform, right? And it turns out that if you put a selection of photographs together, you will find a high proportion of them are actually in that environment, because just finding them you will get a lot of species, and just because the sheer number of species, the high probability you'll get a few which are good, but the percentage of keepers are obviously much greater at the feeders. So I've often found that what works best, if possible, is to have a private guide, because then you have your freedom, and then you can choose how you want to do it. Especially if you get a group of friends together and get a private guide, you can split the cost, and like-minded folks, and then you can make your own itinerary, spend your own time. You're not bound to any specific itinerary or schedule.
Pete is asking, where should we go for our first trip to Peru?
I mean, it's a hard choice. I mean, it really depends on what you're going after, right? So I'll just say 3 quick options, right? So one is the Iquitos area, where I first went. If you want the true sense of the Amazon, of the rainforest, and I have a friend, Aerie, she's here. I think we talked to them. I think they went to Peru too, in a similar place. If you want to get a true sense of the Amazon, the real Amazon, and get a quick sense of the rainforest, and you're only going to do 1 or 2 trips, I think you can't go wrong by going to Iquitos. And there are a sequence of lodges there, and you can get some special species and you get the rainforest experience. Or you can go to, if you've never seen Machu Picchu, I mean, that's worth going to. Machu Picchu is an experience in itself. And it's great because you can combine Cusco with Machu Picchu and then make a trip down to Manu. And at one time, that was a hard trip to do. There was a very bad road, and you had to take a plane to fly into the Manu National Park. Now you can do it by road. So there you get a huge transect from high Andes of Cusco down to the lowlands. 1,000+ species are possible. So in terms of the number of species that are present there, right? So if you want to do a lot of species with a mixture of feeder photography, that's a good one. And now the Northeast are open up, the Northeast Peru circuit, where I was talking about, which at one, the marvelous Pechule tail, this special, it was it was a legendary bird and it required multi-day of camping. And there was one road, but it required camping. And when I went there, it has just started to open up and the road had been built. A lodge had come up, the Huembo Lodge. And now it's become one of the most popular, easy to do, photographer friendly circuits, and especially for hummingbirds. So Northeast Peru is all of a sudden, it's a very good option. So I think it depends on what you want to do.
So my trip is coming up in 2 weeks to Northeast Peru. So I'm really excited for this Pechule tail. Yeah, definitely.
I didn't get a photograph at the feeder. We waited there for 2 or 3 hours. And then we actually had to hike back in the forest, not the grassland there. And I saw one at a distance. So I have a record shot. I still don't have one at the feeder. Yeah. So if Vayun feels like it, I'm very motivated to go back.
I'm hoping to see one, definitely. Yeah. But yeah, I'm excited for the trips to South America now, because I just started photographing birds like just 4 or 5 years ago, and it's very very infectious.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah. Again, a lot of thanks on the chat. No questions as such. There's one question actually earlier on, is saying, what is the next trip?
We're thinking about it. Let's see, with the pandemic. I have a couple of things I want to see. My most sought after birds there in Colombia, and the Colombian Amazon. I would like to go with Vayun, right? So it depends on his schedule. And for him, a lot of things would be new. And I don't mind repeating Iquitos or repeating Manu with him. But there are large chunks that are missing for me. But my first choice would either be Central Peru, which is a big chunk that's missing, and then Colombia. And Colombia, of course, like I've never been to. But among Colombia, my particular desire is the Colombian Amazon for a couple of species that I really want.
And Bonnie is asking, have you been to Cuba?
I have not been to Cuba. No. Yeah, there are several interesting. I mean, the Caribbean birding is fun. I mean, we got a sense of that in Bahamas and Trinidad. Small areas, not that many species, and some endemics. And Cuba is a mixture of both. It's large enough that it has a lot of diversity, and it has a whole bunch of endemics. So I know there were a few of our local birders were there recently, but I would love to go there someday.
I just need to grab a hold of their names so that they can come and present here. Well, if no more questions, thank you so much. I mean, really, really appreciate this. Thanks again for coming back. And like I said, you probably have a third presentation that I'm looking forward to as well.
I'll be happy to. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Vivek. Yeah. Bye. Good night, everyone. This will be the last of the year, and summer will be off, and we'll be back in September. So have a nice summer, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.